You're listening to a purpose-driven marriage podcast, and this three-part series is proudly sponsored by the Ultimate Communication Course for Couples, a transformational program that will help you and your spouse go from feeling frustrated, disconnected, and misunderstood to experiencing increased trust, greater intimacy, deeper connection, and an aligned purpose in your marriage. Check out the show notes below for more information. And now let's continue on to the series, Keeping the Romance Alive Through the Parenting Years. Hello, and welcome to a purpose-driven marriage podcast. We are Duane and Nadine Stewart, and we love any and all things marriage. You've tuned into the right place if you're looking for actionable, practical tips to help you overcome real-life obstacles common to real relationships. We're here to help you strive for a marriage as God has designed it and not as the world has defined it. Because why settle for a good marriage when you can have a great one?
All right. So we're on to part 2 of our 3-part series, Keeping the Romance Alive During the Parenting Years. And we first covered the baby to toddler years, and now we're on to grade school years. And Nadine, don't you remember that, during those toddler years, it was pretty challenging, right?
Probably the most challenging of the seasons, right, of parenting for us.
Yeah.
I would say baby to toddler years were the hardest.
It was the hardest. But then we got to grade school years, middle school, and we started to see some openings for us. Hey, we're starting to see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like these years, right, the grade school years, we were busy. Right. But I felt like we had a greater and more frequent opportunities to connect.
Yeah.
Right. And it's even, during the baby and toddler years, it was really challenging for us, mainly because we had never done it before.
Right.
Right. And then with each child to add on top of that.
In the beginning was, okay, one child's got soccer, one child's got school, one child's got this and that. And then you add 2, and then you add 3, and then you add 4. And now we're at 6. And all of a sudden our schedule is so busy that we can't even really breathe. We have everything on a schedule. Once we get home, you're going here, I'm going there. And it just gets extremely difficult for us to find time just for ourselves together.
Oh, yeah. So this season, the grade school years is a different kind of busy, right? This is when the kids are older, right? So, but they're not quite old enough to drive themselves places, but they're also too old for us to put them in a swing and hope that will keep them preoccupied for a little bit, or stick some Dora the Explorer on TV.
Put them in front of iPad or in front of the TV, right? That doesn't work anymore.
And even during these years, the grade school years, I mean, our social life, our social life revolved around the kids' play dates.
Yeah. Or practices.
Oh my goodness. Yes. All of our kids played some sort of sports. Everyone played soccer.
Yeah. Our adult time was, hey, who can I talk to or sit next to during my kid's soccer practice or football or basketball practice, right?
Yeah. And it's so funny because we started off by saying that this felt easier for us than the baby and toddler years, but the way that we're describing it actually makes it sound more challenging. And it posed a different kind of challenge, because even though there are more activities, they're also old enough to be with a babysitter or, a family or a good friend, right? They're old enough for us to be able to make time for ourselves when we were able to squeeze it in, between tournaments and things like that.
Yeah.
And so we have 3 tips to successfully keep the romance alive in your relationship during the school age years.
Right. And so the first one is intentionality. So we talked about that last time, but it's very, very important to be intentional about making opportunities for you to reconnect or to connect. The second one is being strategic and creative. You gotta, this is the time for us to really start thinking, okay, so how can we, manufacture some time for us? And then managing expectations, understanding that, things are going to be a little bit different now. How can we now adjust and be flexible so that we still get our time in, but it's going to feel differently than it did previous to this period of time in our life.
Yeah. So starting with intentionality. So that, like we already said last week, is going to be just a constant theme, right? A consistent theme.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to hear that from us every week, and you're going to hear that from us on other episodes talking about other topics. And that's because intentionality, I mean, that is you choosing, making a decision to make your marriage a priority.
Yeah.
And that's critical. That's critical regardless of what stage of parenting, what stage of your marriage you might be in. Intentionality will always play a role in the quality of the relationship that you have.
Right.
So in this stage, the grade school stage, right? Date nights. Oh, I know that we say this over and over again.
It never stops. You have to continue this from the time that you have, that your child is born till when they're gone and out the house, really. Mm-hmm. So it's all about making sure that date nights are a priority. If you're not making them a priority, then you need to start right now.
Yeah. And date nights don't have to just happen at night either, right? So depending on your schedule, coffee dates, breakfast dates, daily time together.
Yeah.
Right. I think is really essentially what the bottom line is.
Yeah.
Right. The date nights, obviously we can't do every single day, but if we can't get that date night in, consistently, if we're not able to do it weekly, then it's even more important that we are creating opportunities for us to keep in constant contact with one another. Right. Continuously being connected on a daily basis, because when we don't, the task that we, somehow have piled up, between the kids' homework, our volunteer responsibilities, our jobs, for many couples, both have to go to work. I mean, that was our situation.
Yeah. And what ended up happening is, you're working, I'm working, we might have some contact, maybe a text message or a phone call in between. But as soon as we get home, usually that's the time for us to talk and sit down. But no, that's the start of our second job. And so you take one kid to practice, I take one kid to dance lessons and whatever else is going on, maybe something at school. And we get home, maybe we eat dinner, and then it's homework time. And there's so many things that kind of get in the way. So it's all beautiful, it's all wonderful, it's all part of our job. But then how do we continue to stay connected and really create opportunities for us to talk and to converse and those types of things?
Yeah, well, if we're not careful, we can become like two ships passing in the night.
That's right.
Right. In fact, there was a study that was done in Los Angeles, I believe, where they studied a group of working parents for 1 week to see how many minutes in a 1 week period, a 7-day period, they spent actually talking to each other, right? Having conversations with one another. And they found that in that particular study, 35 minutes, babe. 35 minutes.
So let's think about that. So there is 24 hours in a day. You're hopefully sleeping for 8 of those hours, but maybe not. So you got a lot of time throughout the day to talk. And you're saying that every single day for a week, just 5 minutes a day. That's what you're saying? That's crazy when you really think about it.
It is. That's why.
And not only that, it's probably just, hey, where are you going? Okay, I'm taking little Jimmy to here. Where are you going? Okay, so I'm going here. And then you get home. What do you want for dinner? And it's not really even like connection type of talk. It's just transactional discussions.
And that's the reason why intentionality is so important. That time together is so important. Making sure that you're going on dates, even scheduling sex.
Yeah.
Right. Like we'll talk about that later in managing expectations. But, a lot of people cringe when they hear about, scheduling sex. Well, you know what? In this season, you may have to.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Right. In fact, that leads into the second tip that we have. And that's, learning to be strategic and creative.
Right. Yeah.
When you're scheduling sex, I think it gives you an opportunity to practice foreplay all day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All day.
Yeah.
Right? It's really important that people begin to recognize that foreplay shouldn't just happen in the bedroom, especially for us women.
This is when I really started to understand, okay, this is like it's just like the long play, right? It's not like you're trying to, not like you're intentional about, okay, I'm going to send this message because this is what's going to happen. But but it's really about, okay, so thinking about your wife, thinking about your spouse throughout the whole day. When you leave the house, give them a kiss, maybe make some coffee for you in the morning, have a little conversation, you're off, send a text message halfway through, maybe even have like call you right on the way home while we're driving home. Hey, let's have a conversation and start talking about your day or whatever it is, and just being intentional about those things, because that went, from my opinion, and what I discovered is it went a long way to just establishing and continuing the connection from the beginning of the day to the end of the day.
Well, there are places that we can't avoid having to be at, like, our kids' activities, programs at school. And so even just when you reach out and you hold my hand and we're holding hands while we're watching a soccer game, or as we're walking through the school for curriculum night or whatever it might be, to me, that feels really sexy.
Yep.
That feels like we're connecting. Like we have the secret that you and I are sharing, right? Of pursuing intimacy with one another right there in the midst of all these other people.
Yeah.
Right. And so
we're in like our own little bubble, right?
Yeah, in our own in our own little bubble. Exactly. Yeah. So having to be strategic and creative in the way that we engage with one another, we connect with one another, the way that we exercise foreplay throughout the day, right? Whatever that might look like for everyone. To us, it looked, a certain way, but for other people, it may look something different. But then there's also, babe, so we'll share this tip with you guys because it was incredibly, what's the word I'm thinking about? Effective for our family.
Yeah.
So
we're talking about like night
oh,
times.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that most people have the same challenge that we did, is that once you're sleeping, there's no child in the bed. And somehow throughout the night, that little ninja child sneaks up in the bed, crawls in there all ninja like, and you wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning, and you got a child literally laying right between you and your spouse. I'm like, how in the world did you get here? You know what I mean? And so that continued to happen over and over and over. And we're like, okay, so how can we create a situation that gives us the best of both worlds? Our child gets their time with us because that's what they need, but we get our time together. And we created family night.
We did.
And family night was every Friday. Our kids can come into our room. We'd have a movie night. We'd have popcorn. We'd have all these different things. And then once we're all done, they can sleep in the bed. And obviously, once you get to a point where your kids, we got a lot of kids, right? So 3, 4, 5 kids, everybody can't sleep in the bed, but it became a fun experience for everybody. There was a couple of the small ones in the bed. Everybody else had sleeping bags around the bed. And it was just a fun night. And so they knew that the expectation was on Friday, we get to go in a room. So I don't have to try to sneak in and lay down in the bed unless they're scared or something like that, every night.
Oh, yeah. And what that did for us was it freed us up 6 nights out of the week, because whenever the kids would whine and say, I want to sleep in your bed, we'd say, oh, yes, of course. We've got Friday. Family night coming up in 2 nights. And I can't wait for you guys to come sleep in our bed with us. Yeah. And so we did that for quite a while until the kids finally
got too big.
They got too big. They're like,
and they complained about me snoring.
Now they're like, Daddy snores, I can't sleep.
Yeah.
So then they excuse themselves from family night.
Okay.
Right. But then actually I've got one more pro tip. Right. This one was another game changer for us. So again, being intentional, but then number 2, being strategic and creative. And sometimes you just you can't get that intimate time at night. And so when all of our kids started going to school, Duane and I found a way, before we would head off to work, to have that intimate time with each other when the kids were all gone.
Yeah.
And so, who says it always has to be at night?
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to be at night. Sometimes get that alone time in the morning. And we began to really cherish that time together in the morning once all the kids got on the bus. And we were, fortunate that they got on the bus pretty early in the morning, but it was nice to be able to have that time together. And when we had that time together that morning, it reduced the the pressure or
Mm-hmm.
that need to have to do it again
Right. And
later
but that
that
I
night.
think that also I think falls under managing expectations, right? Because we
Yep.
talked about being strategic, but it is strategic and it also manages expectations because you're like, okay, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have to fit it in whenever we can because if it's in the morning, that's great. If it's in the afternoon or night, that's also good. If it doesn't happen, that's all good too because we understand the realities of having a large household with all these things, all these kids, roaming around the house and stuff like that. So it is under managed expectations too, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's, our point number 3 or
Mm.
tip number 3. There, the acceptance that in this season, sex can look different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, depending on the day. Right. In fact, I attended a women's conference many, many years ago. I think we may have only had one child at the time. And I remember the speaker talking about the 3 different types of sex that she and her husband had agreed
Mm-hmm.
upon. Right.
Okay,
And
I
she
remember
called
this.
and she called it she said it was like the drive-through meal,
Yeah,
the what was that?
it's like a
Sunday dinner,
dinner, right? Mm-hmm.
and then the holiday feast.
Right.
Right. And so,
So you guys can all imagine what all 3 look like.
yeah, you've got basically the quickie,
Yep.
right? What you can get in. And
Mm-hmm.
then you've got the Sunday dinner,
Yeah.
which is nice, a little bit more thought out. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's when you give yourself a chance to exercise foreplay all day.
Right.
Right. And so then that primes you
And I'm
for,
guessing the feast is more like, hey, we are going to a hotel or a resort, and we're going, just live it up. Have some dinner beforehand, have a walk, or go to a movie, or go to a club or a
yeah, well,
bar.
that's the one that's happening like maybe once or twice a
Yeah, but
year.
that's a feast, right?
Yeah, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
holiday feast,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And so she said that when during different seasons of their marriage, sometimes they had more of the sit down dinners.
No doubt.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they had a lot more of the drive-through meal.
Drive-bys. Yeah.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so managing those expectations, as long as you guys are both in agreement,
Yeah.
hey, that works.
Yep.
And depending on the kind of support you have, you can try to get, as the kids get older, you can start taking those overnight trips,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Those weekends away, or even, we'll talk about
That
it.
happens in the next stage.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
often.
What happens in the next stage,
Mm-hmm.
you can go a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is to keep it going.
Yeah.
Right. To keep it going, keep sex going. That's, realistically for women. And this is a tip for all of you ladies that are listening. The more time you allow to go by without having sex, the less likely you are to want to have
Mm-hmm.
sex.
Mm-hmm.
But the more frequently you do have sex, the more likely you will find yourself being interested
Mm-hmm.
in sex. Right. And even, with the whole managing expectations thing, having that conversation with your spouse about what feels good to you, what's pleasurable to
Right.
you, what it is that you desire in your
Mm-hmm.
encounter together. Do you want cuddling before or after, or none of the above?
Right.
Do you, what positions do you prefer? What type of stimulation works for
Mm-hmm.
you? Like having those conversations so that you can manage, the expectations, and no one is feeling like they're having to,
You don't have to
do
guess.
this. Yeah. like a task, right?
Right.
Just to please their spouse,
Mm-hmm.
but instead it's something that's mutually enjoyable.
Right. And I think that's the most important thing, because once you know expectations, once you know like what what pleases your spouse, and if you do those things, you're like, okay, this is this is going to turn out really well because he'll be happy, or I'll be happy too. Then hey, why not? I mean, those conversations sometimes are not had, and
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing. Probably a whole different discussion that we could have, but I think that's important because your time is limited.
Yeah.
Right. And if you have limited time, why not make the most of it? Give your spouse what they're, what they like the most, what pleases them the most. And I think that makes your intimate time just a lot more impactful.
Absolutely. And that actually gives me an idea to do an episode about how to talk to your spouse about what you desire sexually.
Yeah.
And so, but in the meantime, for this episode, we went over keeping your romance alive during the school age years. We went over how intentionality plays a big role, how it's important to be strategic and creative, and then managing each other's expectations.
Things look differently.
Right? So that's it for today's episode and the second of our 3-part series on keeping the romance alive through each stage of the parenting years. Tune in next week when we talk about the teen to young adult years.
Yeah. Almost out the house.
Yeah, exactly. So if you enjoy this episode, would you please consider sharing it with someone else who can benefit? And while you're at it, go ahead and leave us a review. We hope this episode has provided you encouragement and tools to continue to have a purpose-driven marriage. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.